Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi,
How are you?
hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? A virus works essentially by hijacking the protein synthesizing mechanism within host cells and then changing it by inserting its own genetic material. The host cells, completely unaware and unable to respond to this hijacking, go about reproducing the virus until the host organism is itself overwhelmed and destroyed. Much like this viral process, socialism reproduces itself the same way until it also eventually and inevitably dies along with the host. The only way that we stand any chance of stopping the woke viral hijacking currently suffocating our free society is to identify the precise means by which it is able to pollute our culture with its toxic DNA. So, I want to offer a brief discussion on what I see as the precise location of this contamination. A lot of heavy-hitting thinkers have kind of bombarded all around this, but I don't think anyone has really dialed into the precise mechanism or site where this is occurring. So just some very brief background. Universities are to this revolution what genetic material is to a self-replicating virus. American colleges and universities have become hopelessly corrupt. That begins with the corruption of the highest achievement possible in education, the PhD. Now, awarding a PhD requires that a student compose an original and substantial contribution of new knowledge through research. That's the gist of it. PhDs came into existence at Humboldt University in Berlin in 1810, and the first PhD awarded in the United States was at Yale University in 1861. Now, you could essentially categorize the PhD into one of two categories. You have the quantitative and you have the qualitative, quantity and quality. Though a good PhD will have elements of both, these are the two basic styles or methods of producing a PhD. So just some very quick background. The quantitative method is based on numbers, the collection of empirical data, measuring actual differences among things. The qualitative style is aimed more at the why and the how things came to be, whatever they are. It's designed to dig deeper and make an educated or informed guess as to why the data is what it is. So just for a quick example, a quantitative analysis will show how many people in each state voted for a candidate for office despite their official registered party affiliation being different. A qualitative analysis will attempt to answer why they voted for a candidate who did not represent the party with which they were formally affiliated. So that's the basic difference between the two. Now, if you go a little further into the qualitative, one particular style of qualitative analysis is the ethnography. The ethnography is conducted to learn about some particular group of people and is relied upon primarily in the social sciences, which is itself an oxymoron. Social sciences. There's no such thing. There's science with empirical data, that's science. And then there's studying social things, which is not science. That's an important distinction to get out of the way right off the bat. So the ethnography essentially relies on conducting interviews and making observations within some subset of culturally distinct people. And the researcher or ethnographer will collect details about their attitudes and attempt to surmise their motives and approaches in order to form broad opinions or conclusions about their behavior, customs, habits, etc. Now, a particular style of ethnography, just to go one layer deeper on this thing, that has ravaged academic legitimacy and spread like cancer through the universities is called the autoethnography. The autoethnography is a useless and meaningless collection of basically just the researcher's personal experiences, contrived into an analysis using a couple of established theories that they pulled together. And it purports to present something relevant, since the researcher is drawing on their own experience in some loosely organized manner that is passed off as academically valid for having been technically produced by an educated person and gone through some established process. It is essentially an organized diary of the researcher who uses the framework to pass off their own opinions about the world as relevant and important because these are their personal and subjective experiences. Don't we all need insight into them? Aren't you dying to know what their personal experiences and insights are? Now, nothing could be further from relevant or important about these pieces of shit. The autoethnography is a fraudulent, unacademic, subjective opinion about something that is based exclusively on the identity of the author and passed off as academically rigorous, when it is actually an irrelevant, perspective-based rubber stamping of the opinions of the author within some academic setting and a very thin academic veneer on the outside of it. American colleges and universities are now ground zero for this Marxist indoctrination in much the same way that the Biden crime family, for example, laundered money by passing it through several banks. Universities also serve as the nucleus of this indoctrination, and they pass off their toxic genetic material through these autoethnographies, which have become quite the rage in the last several years for obvious reasons. If you can publish and have someone rubber stamp your personal diary and call it a PhD, and then you could put that on your resume and get a important job somewhere or rise to some level within the company where you already work, that's a tremendous advantage. Now, the problem is that employers have no idea. So if I were to go to an employer and I have PhD on my resume, they're just going to look at that and they're going to instantly be impressed. Wow, this person went all the way through a university and achieved the highest honor. About the most they're going to do is contact the institution in order to verify that, yes, I was awarded a PhD. They're not going to go digging around online and see if they can find my dissertation and then sit there and read it and try to come to a conclusion as to whether or not it was thoughtful or relevant. And does it really demonstrate that I have some special talent? Hell no, they're not going to do that. People are more than willing to see those three letters on the resume and presume instantly that this is a bona fide candidate and this is the gold standard. And so that's where the problem is. These autoethnography PhDs are useless pieces of shit, and they need to be characterized as such. They need to be disqualified. And anyone who has produced an autoethnography as a PhD, that needs to be called something else, effective immediately. Your PhD needs to be revoked and replaced with something else. It's fun, you know, we can award something for that, I suppose. I don't know what that would be, and I don't really care. That's for someone else to figure out. But it doesn't need to be masquerading as a bona fide PhD, because it's not. It's the furthest thing from it. And so this is the means by which the universities are able to produce incompetent, incapable candidates for PhD awards and then award them PhDs on these pieces of shit that they're producing. And then they in turn, just like the virus injecting its genetic material into the host cell, send these incompetent and incapable people out into the world to go occupy positions of power and to work in industry and in education, which is where the main problem is. Kindergarten through 12 teachers are all trained at teachers' colleges. You have to have a graduate degree in order to be able to do that, which means you have to be a product of some American college or university if you're going to teach K through 12. And so universities have basically corrupted the PhD. This is what has allowed the incompetent to come in and now have a PhD that they don't deserve and didn't earn, and then go out into the K through 12 education system and continue replicating that same thought virus, that same sick, woke mental illness that we see infecting everything around us, and everyone seems hopelessly incapable of dealing with. So if we can get these garbage PhDs disqualified or called something else, or at least get people informed that they need to look a little closer when they see those 3 letters on a resume, and they need to realize that everyone in K through 12 has gone through this indoctrination. And that's why these parasitic ideas are infecting the minds and indoctrinating our children, because they're not going in and teaching history and math and science, etc. It's much easier for an incapable and incompetent person to just go to work every day and just really hate racism and really be in support of trans people. And this is all baked into their lessons. It's baked into their methodology. This is what they're doing in the classroom. That's why we are now producing some of the dumbest students upon graduation. 11% are able to pass a basic competency exam in history. 11% can pass that in the United States. That's absolute. It's beyond appalling. It's laughable. Absolutely laughable. What in the hell are they doing in there? So now notice what happens. When students arrive at college, they're already 2/3 of the way there. Take my word for it. I work at a college, and there's no worse feeling than having some green-haired, over-pierced, moralizing 19-year-old come in there like a member of the Hitler fucking youth and scrutinize every little thing that you're doing. And you get a sense of it immediately. You know who they are. And it's not necessarily what they look like. It's not the nose piercings and the green hair, although that is usually an indicator to look a little closer. Just throwing that out there. But you can tell by the attitudes. And these are not students who are there to learn. They're not open-minded. They've already been conditioned, indoctrinated, trained. It's too late for them. They are beyond hope. And all you can do as a society is hope to marginalize them in some way so that they don't go on to spread these horrible mind viruses. There really is no worse feeling than that. And these are not students who are just going to be difficult with you and ask you questions and try to change the subject in class all the time to something that they want to talk about, though they are doing that as well. These are students who are listening to you, as I said, like members of the faithful Hitler youth, and they're just waiting for you to step on one of the landmines that they have planted secretly out there in terms of language. You say the wrong thing, you take the wrong attitude, you take the wrong position, you share the wrong thinker with them, up storming out and directly to the president's office to demand that you be fired from your job. Some moronic, unintelligent, uneducated, moralizing 19-year-old is going to do that. And you can count on that every single semester now. So what am I supposed to do in response to that? Am I supposed to pull back and change up my lesson plans? Am I supposed to be afraid of that and start withholding information and self-censoring in order to get around that? Fuck that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm going to show them everything that they need to see. And it's like a buffet. They don't have to take it, but I'm going to put it in front of them. And if they want it, they can take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and maybe leave that. That's just standard fare for any class. I'm not there to give them things and force them to accept it. All I can do is put the information out there in front of them. If they want it, they'll take it. If they don't, then they won't. That's fine. But these psychotic, warped members of this modern day Hitler youth are just absolutely out to destroy you entirely. They want your career. They want you ruined. They don't want you to be able to work again. It's absolutely appalling that this is going on. But you know what? They're really not the main source of the problem. The main source of the problem is the other adults in the institution who are happy to appease them. They're happy to go along and to acquiesce with whatever they want, because universities and colleges in this country are no longer educational institutions. They're fucking country clubs. That's it. How can we cater to the student? You know, I finished this semester and we were treated to this. Embarrassingly, it's someone who graduated from Ithaca College, of which I happen to be an alumni as well. And he looked to be about my age, so I didn't recognize him. It's a big school, not that I would, but just some asshole in a DC think tank. And the general thesis of his, whatever the hell it was for a fucking hour he droned on, was basically, well, we've got to meet the students where they're at. Now, what in the hell kind of educational philosophy is that? We've got to meet the students where they're at. From an administrative standpoint, yes, if they have deficiencies, then they need to get into the pre-math and or the pre-English and dust up on skills before they can go in there. But no, we're not there to meet them where they're at. We're there to set the standards, to be the adults, to have the ones with moral authority in the classroom, and to say, here are the standards you must meet and you must reach if I'm going to pass you from this class. That's what we're there to do. And it's this idea that there are no longer adults in education. Everybody is willing to roll right over and fork their ass cheeks open for these kids at the drop of a hat. Doesn't matter what they want. Yes, we'll do it right away. You got it. We've got to start meeting them where they're at. No, we don't. We have to start upholding the goddamn standards that made us quality institutions to begin with. End of story. As I said, the main problem is not that you have these warped 19-year-olds who are just gunning for you in the classroom. They're not there to learn. They're there to make sure that you don't step out of line, and they're policing you. And if you do step out of line in their mind, then it's their obligation to see to it that you are thoroughly ruined as a human being. They are not the worst part of the problem, though. The people on campus who should be the adults, the administrators, the people who are part of that gigantic blob that has grown by 900% in the American universities over the last 4 decades. You heard me right. 900% we have grown the administration by in just 40 years. That's shocking. These people are more than willing to cede all moral authority to the woke students who show up there. And that's the real problem, is that some obnoxious 19-year-old in your classroom is there just to give you a hard time and to derail the lesson and to sit there and police you. That's easily solved. And we shouldn't need to even bat an eyelash to solve that. Get out, take your things and get out and don't come back here. But the problem is we've been disempowered to do that. So I can tell you as an instructor, I have no authority whatsoever. I can catch a student cheating, cell phone in the lap, right? Just like this. And then they look up as they don't realize that I'm standing right there staring at them. I'm not allowed to eject that student from the classroom because the school's policy is, well, they paid tuition for the class. They've got a right to be in there. Really? Go buy a ticket to the movie theater and start talking on your fucking phone and try that with them when they go to haul you out. You tell them, I bought a ticket. I've got a right to be in here. See if that works for you there. The problem is that these adults have ceded moral authority. They don't want to stand up because they're afraid if they make a stand, then they'll just be the next one in the chain of dominoes that these woke assholes are knocking down. So everybody is ready to just roll over for them and do whatever they want. No support whatsoever for the instructors. This creates a path for them to absolutely bulldoze their way through education. And on top of this vicious indoctrination that they're overwhelmed with, they're also 19. And so I remember how I was at that age, just very rebellious. And I just didn't have the respect for adults that I should have. I had to put on a veneer of it in order to get through situations. But I remember being an obnoxious asshole around that time as well. And if there were adults around me who were willing to roll over and acquiesce to whatever demand that I came up with, are you kidding me? I would do the same thing. I would push them even further. Oh, tell you what, you have to use my special made up pronoun. And I have this thing called a gender identity. It's how I identify myself. And it's now your obligation to support that. And if you don't, so help you, I will fucking crush you. Yeah, I probably would do that too. But when I was a young man, adults did not cede moral authority to 19-year-olds. So if anybody had tried that shit, they wouldn't have got very far with it. Today, everything has changed. And so everybody's afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of not getting tenure. They're afraid of some consequence. And so they're more than willing to self-censor and to step out of the way and to allow these students to roll right over them and destroy the lesson and the lecture and the whole mission that you're there to accomplish. So just to summarize here, this begins with the corruption of the PhD in this autoethnography piece of shit, which allows the incompetent and incapable to get a PhD and then to go on into K through 12 as teachers and highly regarded and respected, and to teach nothing about the topic that they're there to teach about. I mean, think about it. If you were a college instructor, it's hard work to go in there and try to stay on top of, what is the latest information about whatever field that you're teaching in, what's relevant, what's cutting edge. I got to stay on top of that. I got to be on top of my game. I have to publish things. I'm expected to participate in committees and do all this other bullshit and be part of the big process. And that's a lot of hard work. It's a lot easier to just come in every single day and just really hate racism and really support the trans community. That's a lot easier. And if you do that, you'll be there forever. You will propel straight up the ladder if that's the attitude that you take. Nobody gives a shit about what you're teaching anymore, or how effective you are, or that you happen to give a shit about educating students and giving them the tools to go out and be successful. Nobody cares about that anymore. What they care about is, are you following the rules? Are you meeting the students where they're at? Are you doing things to support them? Are you making them feel comfortable and safe in your classroom? I think at this point, the only thing that keeps me hanging on is you still have some small, though relatively significant number of students who you can tell they're not falling for this woke bullshit. They've fought it off in their K through 12 schools, God bless them, and they've arrived there and they're just that much hungrier to learn and more eager to absorb information. And they're so much more appreciative of someone who is willing to stand up for what's true and stand up for the academic process and to not take any shit from the Hitler Youth that shows up to derail you. And that's really the only thing that's keeping me going right now. I'm not going to be able to retire before this thing gets out of control. So I don't know what I'll do. But the idea that I would make a move into administration because I could go make a difference there and start changing it, yeah, that's forget that. We're too far gone. The apple is too rotten to cut the brown spots out of it and try and salvage it. There's nothing left, right? There's nothing left. The apple's totally gone. Throw it away and go pick another apple off the tree. And I hate to be so pessimistic about it in that way, but I couldn't bear to not be honest about it. So that is the current state of education. What needs to be done is these fucking assholes with their bullshit autoethnography PhDs need to be plucked out of there and sent packing. And we really need to come up with some way, whether it's cameras in the classroom or some sort of process to vet these people, to make sure that we don't have Marxist, indoctrinated, idiot assholes in our classrooms pushing critical race theory and crazy ideas about gender and training these kids. When they show up at college now, they're already 3/4 of the way there. So they will themselves also go on to become K through 12 teachers one day. Now imagine what that's going to be like. Imagine how hardened the next group is going to be when they show up. And this thing is just cycling like this. And they're getting worse and worse and worse. And it's like a snowball rolling downhill, picking up steam. And we're the little town that sits at the bottom of it, watching it get bigger and bigger and bigger. God help us.